Okay, a few years ago, my grandma died, and I went up to Idaho for her funeral, and I went to my grandpa's house where the whole family was meeting, and they were all sitting in the kitchen. As I entered, my grandpa looked at me, and with tears in his eyes, he said, "Now I'm single, just like Jill." And it shouldn't have, I was only 26 at the time. It shouldn't have been such a big deal. But I come from a family of really conservative Mormons, and so I was 5 or 6 years past my prime at the time. Now, I've lived in Honduras as a teacher. I've lived in Dominican Republic as a student. But the only time that I've ever felt culture shock in my life was when I started as a freshman at Brigham Young University. Now, BYU is a Mormon university in Provo, Utah, and it's conservative even for a lot of Mormons, by the standard of a lot of Mormons. And I'd grown up in Chicago, and I was used to having a really diverse group of friends. My friends came from all different kinds of ethnic backgrounds, different sexual orientation, different religions, and I was used to being kind of special. I was the Mormon one. Well, at BYU, that wasn't really the case. BYU is about 98% Mormon, at least it was back then. I don't know what it is now. And everybody looked a lot like me, except hotter. And so it was a big cultural adjustment for me. I remember the first day of freshman orientation, they had us playing, like those get-to-know-you games. And obviously I was too cool for that. And so I was horrified when they tried to make me pass an orange from my neck to the neck of another person. But the thing that shocked me the most were the cheers. They made every group make up a cheer, and you had to compete with the other groups to have the best cheer. And everybody was really enthusiastic about it, and I thought it was lame. And so that night, I went to the dorm in the bathroom, and I was really depressed. I was despondent. I was a flight risk. I didn't know what I was going to do. And a girl came in, and she said, "I hate this orientation. I can't take this for another minute." And that's when I made my first friend. And I noticed quickly there were a lot more normal people. Like most people are normal. There's some religious fundamentalists, but not really that many. And I started to adjust. Now, when you enter BYU, you have to sign something called the Honor Code. The Honor Code is a set of standards that you agree that you'll follow as a student at BYU. It includes no premarital sex, no alcohol, and no beards. At BYU, you're allowed to have a beard if you have a medical excuse, or I think it's usually a dermatology thing, or if you have proof that you're going to be in some kind of dramatic presentation, like a biblical type thing. And you might be wondering right now, what do people do in college? Think back to your college experience if I didn't invite you, and it probably had a little bit to do with drugs and sex. So, people at BYU have to come up with different ways to entertain themselves. It's interesting, probably from an anthropological perspective. People take care of the sex problem pretty easily because premarital sex is against the rules, so they get married. And there's a lot of marriages on campus. But the rest of it starts with dating. Now, in what we call the Mormon Corridor, which is Idaho, Utah, and Arizona, they practice something called creative dating. Now, when you go on a creative date, you have to ask the person in a creative way. So this could be some sort of craft, a scavenger hunt, or a serenade. And some of the ideas that I've heard were, for example, some of them are cute, like lining the doorstep of the girl with Hershey Kisses and writing, "I kiss the ground you walk on, will you go out with me?" Or some of them are perverse. Like I've heard of a kid who made a paper mache nose, and he wrote his name on a strip of paper and hung it from the nostril with a little card that said, "Pick me." And some of them are even a little bit risque. One guy went to the doorstep of his beloved and left a cow tongue on it, and he said, "If you go to the dance with me, I'll slip you some tongue." Now, that's probably against the honor code, but it happened. Another thing that people like to do are pranks. At any given time at BYU, there's millions of prank wars. Sometimes they're flirtatious between apartments of boys and girls. And my first experience with pranks was when one day I was sitting on the computer. This was in the late 90s, so I was on AOL Instant Messenger talking to my high school friends, and I had a brilliant idea. I got online and I made a Hotmail address. It was byuhonorcode@hotmail.com. And I started to write to my friends because obviously I knew what they were doing. And so they would be something like this. Dear Chelsea, it has come to our attention that you were wearing booty shorts at the local Target on Saturday. We'd like to remind you that you represent the university both on and on the campus. We would like you to come to the Honor Code office on Monday to discuss this issue. And then I would just pick some random scripture like Malachi 4:15 or something, and just to make it look legitimate. Now, nobody once questioned the fact that the BYU Honor Code office used the word booty shorts or had a Hotmail address. And they would be so stressed out about it. Oh no, I'm going to get expelled. What will my parents do? And I broke them the news because I wanted them to know I was a genius, obviously. But it got me hooked on pranks. Now, after a couple of years at BYU, I started to get Stockholm Syndrome. I really started wanting to get married. And that was never anything that had happened to me before or since. It only lasted for a couple of weeks. But it was stressful. That's a stressful place to want to get married because there's people in love everywhere. You go to the computer lab, there's a couple giving each other a romantic massage, or people feeding each other in the cafeteria, and it was depressing. So I go on my 22nd birthday, I go to this speech on campus, and the speaker basically said, you need to get married really young, or there won't be anybody left. And I thought, I'm 22. That's like BYU 40. And I was horrified, and I was so sad. My sister had it even worse. My sister called me, and she said, she's a year younger than me, so she was a junior. And she said, if I don't meet a guy this year, I might have to graduate. And I said, okay, you need to study more. I was more academic than her, obviously. So things came to a head one morning when I went outside, and I was late for class, and I ran down to the parking garage. And to my dismay, I found that someone had converted my car into a honeymoon vehicle. It said, just married, it had streamers coming out the back. They even put yogurt containers on, like hanging from the back, and there was rice everywhere. And I was late for class, so I had to drive in it. So I'm driving around Provo. So many people are well-wishers, thinking that it's a remnant of some kind of weekend wedding. And people are honking, waving, giving me a thumbs up. And at first I felt really good about it, but then I realized it wasn't true. So I knew that I had to get revenge. So my roommate was a mechanical engineering major, so she had a lot of men in her department. I was education, so I had nothing to work with. And she called the hottest guy in her class, which he was really hot for mechanical engineering. And she said, come over tonight and bring all of your friends. Then we got to work in the kitchen. I started making Jell-O, and I threw random stuff from the freezer in it, like tater tots, peas, any kind of mixed vegetables. Then I made some pasta with chicken in it, but I put 2 cups of salt. And then any kind of condiment from the fridge, anything possible. So we gave the food to the boys, and they went over to the girls' house. And they were awestruck by this guy's attractiveness, and they said, hey ladies, we're new in town. We just wanted to get to know some girls in the apartment complex, so we made you dinner. And they were really excited. I got them where it counted, because their hopes for dating. And they came in, and the girls regretted their decision almost immediately as they started to eat. And one of the girls thought, I just need to get this over with. And she pounded down the entire thing in like less than a minute. And the other girls kept eating slowly, trying to wash it down with water, but you just couldn't hide that taste. And they didn't notice that the boys weren't eating because they were flirting with them so heavily. And eventually they finished, and they said, "All right, ladies, it's time for dessert." And the girls said, no. They couldn't even imagine what that would have in store for them. And they opened the box, and I had written in frosting, "Love, Jill." And my revenge was complete that day. And sometimes I wonder what it would have been like to go to a more traditional school, what my life would have been like. But there was one important lesson that I learned from BYU. And that was that God really loves me because he did me such a big solid. If he'd given me what I wanted to get married when I was 20, then I would probably live somewhere in rural Utah and be pregnant with my 6th child. Thank you.